One summer day in 2014, the New York Police Department received an unexpected call from a woman requesting to speak with the detective handling the Shelley Covlin case. The caller was Deborah Holmes, and she urgently requested a meeting with the investigators. Receiving such surprising news, they hoped this unexpected call might help thaw the long, stagnant investigation into a tragic loss that had been at a standstill for 5 years. It was about the case of Shelley Danishefsky's tragic demise, which had caused a stir in Manhattan on the eve of New Year's 2010. Shelley Covlin grew up on the West Side, immersed in an Orthodox Jewish community. Her family's deep-seated roots in this tight-knit neighborhood shaped her upbringing. Shelley's journey from a blissful childhood to an accomplished adulthood was marked by her love for learning and academic excellence. This passion for knowledge eventually led her to a prestigious degree in asset management, opening doors to a thriving career in the Swiss banking sector. Her rapid ascent in the financial world saw her skillfully managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. In 1998, despite a successful career in one of the world's wealthiest cities, Shelley felt a void in her life. She had financial security and a loving family, yet her dream of having her own family and becoming a mother remained unfulfilled. In February 1998, determined to change her destiny, Shelley attended a Jewish singles event aimed at helping those seeking their significant other. It was there that she met 26-year-old Rod Colvin, a fellow professional in the banking sector. The young couple shared many common interests, both driven by ambitions for success and stability in life. Their connection was instant and profound. The relationship blossomed rapidly as they complemented each other perfectly, disregarding the notable age difference. Shelley and Rod were inseparable, spending every moment together. Their love was so intense that shortly after meeting, they decided to get married. Despite some acquaintances considering it a hasty decision, for Rod and Shelley, everything felt just right. The happy couple soon welcomed 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, completing their family. On New Year's Eve 2009, the idyllic life of the Covlin family was shattered by a tragic accident that led to Shelley's death. Initially, the police deemed it a freak mishap. At the early stage of the investigation, they were convinced it was just that. Early in the morning of December 31st, at the Manhattan police station, 2 officers wrapping up their night shift were discussing their holiday plans over coffee. However, the calm atmosphere was abruptly disrupted at 7:30 a.m. by an urgent phone call. Rod Colvin from the Upper West Side, in a frantic state, informed the officers about bizarre occurrences at his ex-wife Shelley Danishefsky's house. He had found her in her bathtub, submerged in blood-stained water, lifeless. Emergency services hoped Rod could provide the necessary assistance to save the victim. Following the operator's instructions over the phone, Rod pulled her out of the water and attempted resuscitation, but it soon became clear that saving her life was impossible. Shelley's body was cold and motionless. A distraught Rod covered her with a blanket he found in the bedroom and waited for the police to arrive. Thus, on the last day of 2009, Manhattan witnessed a heartbreaking event in the life of Rod Colvin. The police team arrived swiftly at the scene of the incident. Upon arrival, they quickly assessed the situation and cordoned off a central street in Manhattan. They were greeted by a lavish residence just steps away from the city park. The Upper West Side was known for its safety, and the officers initially surmised that Shelley Danishefsky's death was another tragic case of self-harm. Entering the apartment, they found children's toys scattered around, not unusual given the upcoming holiday. They then proceeded to the bathroom, where the woman's body, wrapped in a blanket by her husband, lay. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod had recently pulled the body from the water. A wound on the back of Shelley's head, still bleeding, was noticeable. Surveying the bathroom, the officers noted an open cabinet door with a torn hinge, suggesting the woman might have slipped and torn it off while trying to hold onto the door. Forensic experts who arrived shortly after conducted a thorough examination to rule out other possible causes of the tragic incident. After a careful inspection, they determined there was no break-in, and no signs of a struggle were found. Investigators increasingly leaned towards the belief that Shelley's death was an accident. The detective handling the case decided to speak with family members. During their questioning, it was revealed that Shelley and Rod's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she had seen, the girl managed to tell the police officer how everything happened. It turned out that the previous night, she and her younger brother had been sleeping in their mother's bed, a fairly common occurrence. Waking up in the middle of the night and noticing her mother's absence, she went to look for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. The frightened child hurriedly contacted her father for help. Rod and Shelley had just separated, and he had moved into a new apartment in the same building on the same floor. Crossing the corridor was all it took to reach his apartment. The girl called her father, who was nearby, and arrived immediately. Entering the bathroom, he pulled Shelley's body from the water and called for emergency services. The girl's account matched exactly what Rod had described, confirming the theory of an accidental death. The police informed Shell's relatives about the tragedy, which deeply shocked everyone. The autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the day after the body was found. However, surprisingly, it never took place. When the medical examiner called the investigators to start the examination, he unexpectedly learned that despite its necessity, the procedure would not be conducted. This baffled the examiner, wondering how this could happen. It turned out that a rabbi from the synagogue Shele frequented had intervened. He contacted an organization responsible for the burial of Orthodox Jews, which then requested the police for permission to access the tragedy site for religious rites required by the victim's family's faith. Permission was granted, and a team, accompanied by the rabbi, arrived at the scene. They cleaned the bathtub of blood traces and prepared Shell's body before the burial. All collected evidence and clues were destroyed before reaching the police's forensic department. The organization acted swiftly because autopsies are considered taboo in Orthodox Jewish tradition, seen as desecrating the deceased's body. In this case, the synagogue's rabbi exerted pressure on Shell's family. Grieving relatives and husband, appreciative of the rabbi's assistance, and with no doubts about the accidental nature of the incident, didn't object to his help. The family also agreed to forgo the autopsy, leaving the funeral arrangements to the burial preparation organization. Thus, within 24 hours, Shele was buried. Hundreds of people attended to pay their last respects and offer condolences to the family. Later, upon learning from the police that potential clues were destroyed during the cleaning of the bathroom, doubts about the official version of Shell's death began to haunt her parents. A fall in the bathtub certainly posed a risk, but the likelihood of death from such an accident seemed increasingly improbable to them. Although nothing substantiated their doubts, the thought that their daughter's demise was not accidental troubled them deeply. Since the evidence was destroyed, the New York Police Department lost the opportunity for further investigation, prompting the family to hire a private detective to clarify the circumstances and verify if Shell's death was indeed due to a tragic fall. The private investigator hired by the woman's relatives began unraveling this peculiar case, first visiting the deceased's family home to speak with the relatives. From their statements, he learned that Rod and Shell's relationship was far from perfect, and their marriage had been facing serious challenges. The couple had celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008, but soon after, their marital bliss began to crumble. Rod faced difficulties in his career, frequently changing jobs. It was revealed that he had developed a gambling addiction, investing huge sums in it. These behavioral changes worried Shelley. She was dissatisfied with her husband neglecting the family, spending extensive time on computer games. Rod was using their savings for backgammon tournaments, which Shele had complained about to her close ones, frustrated by the amount of family money he spent on his numerous travels. Additionally, she discovered that he had been unfaithful during his many trips. It's important to note that Shelley was neither passive nor naive regarding her husband's behavior. Upon discovering his infidelities through his emails, she decided to end their marital relationship and obtained permission for a religious divorce. Externally, the couple still appeared as spouses, but Rod had moved into another apartment in the same building. An official divorce required some time to process. Despite their separation and strained relations, Shelley and Rod tried to maintain a friendly facade, especially for their children. However, Conflicts and disagreements often arose due to Rod's behavior. Shele had recently expressed to her close ones her grievances about her husband, describing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt he was monitoring her, entering her apartment when she wasn't home and checking her emails. She also suspected that Rod had installed a camera in the building's corridor to see when she came home. These complexities in their marital life could have been grounds for further investigation into Shele's death. Gathering all these details, the private detective proposed the theory that Rod might have been involved in his wife's demise. He needed to conduct further investigations to uncover the whole truth. The detective's first goal was to determine if a crime had indeed taken place at the scene where the body was found. He planned to inspect Shele's apartment but encountered a problem. The door was sealed. Without hesitation, he obtained a court order to access the site, and with it, accompanied by New York police officers, he arrived at the scene. He attempted to unlock the door with a key provided in advance, but the stubborn lock resisted for some time. After a few moments, Rod Covlin emerged from his apartment at the end of the corridor. He claimed to have heard noise and came to check what was happening. Upon questioning by the police and the detective, Rod took the key and effortlessly opened the door. This raised some questions for the detective. Did Rod really just happen to hear sounds in the corridor, or was he intentionally monitoring the situation? Once inside the apartment, the detective focused intently on finding evidence to support his theory of murder. According to Shele's relatives, she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. The detective thoroughly searched all rooms, only finding the woman's phone charger, while the phone itself was not located. The detective also faced the task of examining the bathroom, the site of Shele's demise. He paid special attention to the hinge that investigators believed she had torn off during a fall. The more he examined this item, the more he doubted that Shele could have torn off the metal detail, which was securely attached to the cabinet. It would have required immense strength, and even considering the woman's weight, there were significant doubts about such a possibility. After a long discussion with law enforcement, the detective tried to convince them that this was not an accident, but a homicide. The investigators were not persuaded, citing a lack of evidence. As a result, a decision was made to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. The impending exhumation of Shele's body sparked serious contemplation and debate within her family. More than 2 weeks had passed since her burial, and it was a difficult decision for her loved ones to make. In the Jewish religion, such interventions are viewed very negatively, and religious leaders often oppose this practice. The family needed time to decide. Despite the prohibitions, they deemed it crucial to uncover the truth about their daughter's death and agreed to the exhumation. However, this step was complicated not only by moral considerations. To carry out the exhumation, a special order from the prosecutor's office was required, which was not easy to obtain. Despite the family's consent, it took almost 3 months. After securing the necessary documents, the exhumation and autopsy were conducted. The results were startling. The examination revealed that Shele did not die from a fall but from asphyxiation due to violent strangulation, which had broken her neck bones. Consequently, the official version of her death changed. No longer could her passing be considered an accident, and it was officially recognized that the young woman had been murdered. The detective's efforts and suspicions proved to be well-founded. The autopsy results of Shele's body played a pivotal role, prompting the New York Police Department to immediately resume the investigation into her death. Investigators began meticulously examining new details, including phone call records and bank statements, all information crucial in a murder investigation. Besides family members, everyone who had any interaction with Rod and Shelley was questioned: the nanny, housekeeper, and even the lawyer handling their divorce. The lawyer informed the police about the oddities he had observed in the couple's behavior. At the first divorce hearing in May 2009, Rod claimed he couldn't pay alimony due to unemployment. The judge jokingly suggested that Rod might have to give up his favorite games, which infuriated him in the courtroom, revealing his true nature to everyone. Rod didn't stop there. He sought revenge against Shele, accusing her of an indecent lifestyle, misusing funds, and even calling her employer with slanderous claims about drugs and violence towards their son. These false accusations caused significant trouble for Shelley. An investigation initiated based on these claims found no evidence to support her husband's words. However, the most appalling aspect of this story was when Rod and Shell's son revealed how his father had coached him to say phrases aimed at discrediting his mother. Rod paid a heavy price for his vile actions. At a new divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, he was prohibited from being alone with his children, a measure that remained in effect even after Shelley's death. Rod was not granted custody of his children, and a social worker handed them over to Rod's parents, inciting his rage. He likely believed that he would finally take responsibility for his children. Police also interviewed a woman who had previously cared for Rod's children before being dismissed by him. She provided detectives with intriguing information. It turned out that on December 30th, Shelley underwent an expensive keratin hair treatment worth several $100s. Post-treatment recommendations included avoiding moisture and heat exposure for several days, thus prohibiting baths or showers. This raised a question. Why would Shelley risk damaging her hair by disregarding these recommendations? Investigators speculated that Shelley didn't take a bath on the day of her death. However, their conclusions weren't direct evidence, and it was insufficient to charge anyone with murder based on this alone. Detectives also reviewed the building's surveillance footage where the couple lived. On the day of the murder, they noticed Rod's peculiar behavior. At 4 a.m., he left his apartment dressed as if he was going outside. He returned after some time. The night watchman at the building's entrance, who was interrogated, found Rod's early morning outing unusual, as he had never left so early before. The watchman remembered Rod asking if he needed anything, to which he replied negatively. However, Rod returned a few minutes later with chocolate bars, offering them to him. The investigators believed Rod's behavior was deliberate to create an alibi for himself. Rod now became the primary suspect, and the investigators' task was to prove his guilt by any means necessary. Their main question was, what could have driven Rod to murder his wife? During the investigation, despite 2 divorce hearings, Shelley and Rod were still officially married, meaning that without a will or divorce, the property would automatically go to Rod. It was a matter of over $5 million. Another crucial point was that on December 31, 2009, Shelley had made an appointment with her lawyer to change her will, intending to exclude her husband. This undoubtedly was a blow to Rod and provided a motive for the crime. The money, $5 million, which Rod could lose, was undoubtedly such a motive. Since he was already a suspect, all of Shell's assets were transferred to a secure account, pending further evidence of his involvement in the crime. It was clear that if Rod had been monitoring his wife, he could have known about her meeting with the lawyer to remove him from the will. Investigators suspected that Rod had installed spyware to track his wife. Surveillance footage also showed Shelley returning home at 8 p.m. the night before, talking on the phone, which was never found after the crime. Now they knew for sure the phone was in the apartment. They decided to conduct another search of the crime scene. Upon returning to the apartment, the investigators didn't have to look long. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw Shell's mobile phone calmly lying on her bedside table, connected to the charger. Neither during the New York police's initial search, nor during the private detective's examination, had anyone noticed the device in this location. Furthermore, investigators had photographed the room during previous searches, and the phone wasn't on the bedside table in the photos. There was only one explanation. Rod had brought the mobile phone back into Shell's sealed apartment. Whether this act was a foolish mistake or a deliberate taunt of the investigation was anyone's guess. Rod was called in for questioning, but he had already hired a lawyer who advised him to remain silent. The investigators had to continue looking for new evidence of his involvement. After examining Rod's phone records, police found frequent calls to a number registered in Jacksonville, North Carolina. The number belonged to Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children. She was 14 years older than Rod. They had met at a backgammon competition 5 months before Shell's murder and had a passionate affair. The lovers met during backgammon tournaments or played online together. The investigators saw a chance to find a lead and decided to call the woman to ask her a few questions. To their surprise, Deborah responded that her lawyer had advised her not to speak to them. Confronted with another refusal, law enforcement officials decided to inquire about the name of the attorney. It turned out to be the same lawyer representing Rod Covlin. The police's last hope rested on finding compromising messages or electronic correspondence between Rod and Deborah. They hoped to discover these on Shele's recently found phone. Unfortunately, all messages had been professionally deleted. Even expert programmers couldn't retrieve the data. Rod had meticulously planned everything, seemingly mocking the authorities. Days turned into months and years, and it became apparent that Rod Covlin was evading justice. Perhaps the crime he committed was perfect, but the rabbi's cleanup of the bathroom, erasing all traces of blood and other evidence, played a crucial role. This action destroyed all potential DNA, fingerprints, or fibers, complicating the investigation, which increasingly dragged on. Rod never admitted to his crime, and the lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years had passed since the investigation into Shele's demise began, yet no arrests had been made. After years of fruitless searches for clues and evidence of Rod Covlin's involvement in his wife's demise, the suspect's mistress suddenly came forward. Following her phone call, the police invited her to the station. Deborah Holmes immediately came in. It turned out that she and Rod had broken up a few months earlier, prompting her to contact the police. What she shared with the investigators over the next 3 days shocked them. Deborah had much to reveal. She told them about Rod's plans concerning custody of his children. Since Rod was still a suspect in his wife's demise and had no custody rights over the children, he couldn't access his deceased wife's money. Rod was prepared to do anything to seize Shele's millions and had hatched a vile plan. Covlin planned to convince his 15-year-old daughter to fake an assault, later accusing his father, Rod's dad, of the crime. This would land the grandfather in jail, losing custody rights over the grandchildren. Rod hoped his daughter would agree to his plan in exchange for money. Meanwhile, the criminal had been regularly withdrawing money from the only account he had access to, the one where Shele had deposited funds for their children's education. Rod's parents noticed he was squandering the savings, which should have been for his daughter and son's future. They were very unhappy with his lack of interest in his children's lives, leading to a dispute. Rod was so angry with his parents that he seriously contemplated ending their lives. In 2012, Rod Covlin confided his plan to Deborah. He intended to have his daughter put rat poison in her grandparents' tea. Since the girl was a minor, Rod calculated she would spend much less time in prison than he would. Deborah persuaded her lover to abandon this evil intent. Following this, Rod conceived several other ideas. At one point, he contemplated burning down his parents' house, jamming the doors to trap them inside. He also considered arranging a sham marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, after which she would have to relinquish part of her inheritance to her father. Listening to Deborah's testimony, the police couldn't believe the reality of such details. All this time, she had been gathering evidence, amassing a trove of data on hard drives. Realizing she was dealing with a psychopath, she cautiously waited for Rod to lose interest in her before handing these valuable insights over to the investigators. The recordings contained hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Rod's conversations with various people. Now the law enforcement officers had to meticulously listen to these gigabytes of data in search of convincing evidence. Deborah's contribution to this complex investigation was significant. As investigators began analyzing the recordings, they discovered something astonishing. In a conversation with a backgammon acquaintance, Rod inadvertently mentioned having keys to Shelley's apartment and the ability to enter it at any time. These hard drives became a real treasure for the police, extracting hundreds of materials related to the case. Investigators found that Rod was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the mother's demise on her. In an email address that the father used to forge an email, it was claimed that the daughter admitted to lying and that her mother didn't just fall. According to the fabricated story, they had an argument in the evening, and in anger, she pushed her mother in the bathroom. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Covlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1st, 2015, Rod Covlin was arrested. Shelley's family awaited the trial of their daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. The charges were circumstantial, and a skilled lawyer could instill doubt in the jurors' minds. Detectives continued their investigation, gathering new data and meticulously verifying all evidence. Soon, irrefutable proof emerged from an unexpected source. While in prison, Rod Covlin revealed details of his wife's demise to a fellow inmate. He described his actions in detail, even mimicking the gesture he used to strangle her. The police requested surveillance footage and found it perfectly matched the autopsy results. This was direct evidence of Rod's guilt, almost amounting to a confession. The trial lasted 7 long weeks. During this time, the jury heard all the heinous plans Covlin intended to execute, including taking his wife's life, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was appalled by his cold-blooded and deceitful nature. It took them 2 days to reach a final verdict. In March 2019, the court found Rod Covlin guilty of the demise of Shelley Danishefsky, his wife, and the mother of his children. Despite the lack of direct evidence, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. Shele Covlin was a successful and determined woman who sought simple family happiness. However, a ruthless, greedy monster crossed her path, destroying not only her life, but also those of her children and loved ones. This tragic story found justice thanks to Deborah Holmes's determination. The criminal was punished for his horrific actions. Deborah's courage likely helped not only in achieving justice, but also in preventing possible future crimes. Rod Covlin will never again harm his family or the citizens of New York. Today, we're going to visit Indianapolis. It is a blend of modernity and original origins, ancient traditions, and advanced technology. Indianapolis boasts art museums that showcase examples of cultural achievements from past centuries and modern times. Indianapolis hosts many festivals and events each year, with the Indy 500 automobile race being the most popular. But in our story, the tranquil Indianapolis that was to become for the Blackburn family a center of peace and God's home on earth became the site of a violent tragedy. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had returned from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car, but a phone call kept him in the vehicle for a few minutes. After finishing the call, he leisurely got out of the car and went into the house. When he opened the door, he froze, and the gym bag fell out of his hands. His wife was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Davy was confused and badly shocked. He rushed to his beloved, gave her a cursory examination, felt for a pulse, and urgently dialed the emergency phone number. The young woman was alive. In the living room where the tragedy occurred was a complete mess. Things were scattered. The purse of the unfortunate was emptied. On the second floor of the house, a small child was crying. Emergency services arrived at the house after 8 minutes. The area was cordoned off. The house was filled with police officers and investigators. The victim was rushed to the hospital. She turned out to be 28-year-old Amanda Blackburn. But let's start in order not to miss any important details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Byers was born on July 31st, 1987 in Muskegon, Michigan. She attended school in Indianapolis, Indiana, but the family moved to Elkhart in 1995. There, Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006, and as early as 2008, she graduated from Pensacola Christian College in Pensacola, Florida with an associate's degree. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family where Christianity and the power of God's Word were paramount. Amanda's father was the lead pastor of First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. The religious traditions of the church, sermons, and psalter the girl knew from childhood by heart and honored them unconditionally. When other children were in a hurry to grow up to know the taste of adult life, to go to parties and fall in love, Amanda loved Jesus and dreamed of serving him. But God already loved his Amanda. After all, he had created her in the likeness of an angel, a blonde-haired, slender girl with an open, kind smile and sincere intentions. But not only the girl's appearance was perfect, her thoughts and heart were also virgin, in every act of a man that was love for her neighbor. As a teenager, Amanda took a vow of chastity and agreed not to even kiss a man until she was married, and she was always true to her word. But the girl's heart beat harder when she met her true and only love. It turned out to be Davy Blackburn. He was a native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The guy studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and was also from a Christian and believing family. Davy and Amanda met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson Christian band concert organized by her sister and Davy's best friend. At that time, they were studying in different colleges, but every vacation the lovers spent together. It was pure platonic love, devoid of earthly lusts. They took walks together, shared their innermost thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. They were never bored, for they knew how to rejoice in small things, and sincerely joked with each other. Once, before returning to school, Davy and Amanda had a mock milkshake drinking contest, which Amanda lost. Davy then jokingly called Amanda a milk girl. Looking at her, he realized he had met the girl he wanted to marry. The couple dated long distance for a long time. They were constantly messaging each other on messengers, called each other and chatted for hours. Every vacation they spent together. They were so reverent and tender about a serious relationship between a man and a woman that they visited a psychologist for a long time to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1st, 2008, the marriage ceremony of Amanda and Davy Blackburn took place. After the wedding, Davy told friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he knew that because of God's plan, there would be a special bond between them. For the first 4 years after the wedding, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina. Davy was an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble, but the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Amanda that she move to Indianapolis to organize a new church for youth. Davy worked as a youth pastor, production director, and assistant campus pastor. Amanda was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones, and for a while struggled with the need to leave South Carolina. But she finally relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved from South Carolina to Indianapolis to plant an independent, high-profile church in the North Side. The religious organization started by the young family was geared toward young people, as is made clear in the weekly videos the couple posted on their website about relationship advice, conflict resolution, and what the Bible says about intimate relationships. In 2014, the family had their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. The family was perfectly happy. They had a comfortable home on a quiet street, a favorite job in the church, which was regularly attended by a large number of young people. Their sermons were listened to and believed in. They lived in perfect harmony and understanding. But the day of November 10th, 2015, changed the family's life once and for all. Ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence in the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8:30 a.m. The ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence. The pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent a series of resuscitative measures. But sadly, Amanda died the next day, along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family was expecting a baby girl who was named Evie Grace at her burial. Her death sparked a lot of sympathy and prayers on social media for an extended period of time as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared dead, Davy released an official statement saying that Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone she knew. She made it her life's mission to know Jesus as her personal savior to multitudes. Through her death and legacy, more people will come to a saving faith in Christ. I know without a shadow of a doubt that she wants me to continue what we started here in Indy. I firmly believe that God is still good, that He is taking our tragedy and turning it into triumph, and that the best is indeed yet to come. Dave wrote, "The murder of the pregnant woman was a blow not only to the entire Orthodox family, but also a shock to the entire state. People demanded that the perpetrator of Amanda and her unborn child be found and punished. In his first interview under oath, Davy Blackburn said he found his wife Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially naked, with her underwear lying nearby, herself lying on the floor in a pool of blood face down. The pastor told investigators that he left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center to work out. When he left the door unlocked. "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door?" he told investigators. It's hard to say whether the criminals would have stopped if Davy had still used the key, but it's pretty obvious that they wouldn't have entered the house so easily, and Amanda had precious time to contact emergency services. But that didn't happen, and the attack left Amanda with 3 gunshot wounds, one of which was to the head. No arrests were made in the case. Just days after the crime, police quickly determined that her husband, Davy Blackburn, was not involved in the horrific incident. However, in the trial transcripts, Davy Blackburn's testimony is supplemented by the testimony of the first emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department, Scott Floyd, who arrived at the home after Davy's 911 call. He said Davy Blackburn was outside at the end of the driveway with bloody hands when they arrived at the house. Scott stated that Davy was very calm at the time. According to Scott, Davy did not understand what had happened to his wife, Amanda. He maintained that she was lying on the floor and he could not wake her up. Davy claimed that he came home from the gym at about 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway, occasionally getting out, strolling down the driveway and peeking through the front door window to see if baby Weston was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8:10 a.m. and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8:22 a.m. It took him 12 minutes to make the call. In an emergency situation, 12 minutes is a long time. He repeatedly said he just thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy, that maybe his wife had gotten dizzy and fell. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leaving him to believe that the gunshot to her head had occurred about a couple hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. Davy was asked if he had called anyone else. He said that after he called 911, he called his father. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davy Blackburn. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym, and he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted November 12th showed the woman suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to the lower left arm that went to her biceps, and a through-and-through gunshot wound that went in and out of her upper back. There were also multiple scratches on the left cheek, a split lip, and a knocked-out lower tooth. The above injuries indicated a possible struggle between Amanda and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined, and neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed. For example, a neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davy left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsell, said their street was not the type of neighborhood where a shooting could occur, and that the Blackburns didn't deserve this. The neighbors were shocked, as everyone thought the Blackburn family were wonderful and truly loving people. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards and MacBook bag, the initial theory was robbery. During the investigation, police determined that on the morning of November 10, 2015, several emergency calls were made reporting a home invasion at separate homes near Blackburn's home. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell phone, laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking lot. The sliding glass door to her apartment was open, she said. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at a home on Sunnyfield Court. Someone broke through the patio screen and got inside. According to police, 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges and bedding were missing from the home. 5 minutes after that, someone else from Sunnyfield Court called the emergency services. It was Davy Blackburn. Lieutenant Richard Riedel of the Indianapolis Police Department said police are looking for a connection between the homicide and other burglaries that occurred in the same neighborhood in the morning. Police have not released details about the investigation, honoring the secrecy of the investigation, but after getting hold of images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released them, asking the public to identify and help the investigation. Davy Blackburn was confident that the police department was doing everything they could to catch his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured that they had never seen such part of Blanche given to them to continue the investigation, so they were confident that very soon some of these promising leads would help find a person or persons responsible. The key clues used to track down the three suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were found in the stolen Chrysler Sebring, which was used during the robberies. Authorities recovered the vehicle November 11th near the Blackburns' home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched the stolen card of Amanda Blackburn. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine the ATM camera and found video showing the driver covering his face with the stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses to identify the suspects. DNA testing from the sweater confirmed that Jalen Watson was one of the suspects. Watson's identification was the first major breakthrough in the case. The affidavit said cell phone records were obtained because Watson's number was in the database because of his parole for another burglary. Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also obtained. These records showed that Watson's and Gordon's cell phones were in the area when the crime was committed. The phone records also indicated that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Larry Taylor was the final piece of the puzzle. By examining surveillance footage in the area, police were able to identify Taylor's phone number and trace his address. In the days that followed, reports also surfaced that a gun had been found near the Blackburn home. Police said a man delivered the gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming to have found it outside the couple's home. The gun was analyzed by crime lab technicians. After 2 weeks of investigation and detective work, police charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jalen Watson with the murder of Amanda Blackburn. A third burglary suspect, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, was arrested for a parole violation, but was not charged with a felony because he did not enter the Blackburn home. After receiving crime lab results, a gun found near the victim's home was proven to be the weapon of the crime. All three assailants were apprehended. When questioned, Larry Taylor said that he shot the woman twice somewhere because she jumped on him and he didn't want her to scratch him. Then, when she fell, he leaned over her body and shot her in the back of the head and bent over her, watching her bleed to death. A criminal trio came to rob the Blackburn house. They just wanted some money. So they headed to the Blackburn home, where the husband had left the front door unlocked when he left for the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda to keep her out of the way. Taylor hit her with a gun. Watson and Gordon saw the woman and wanted to leave. They already had the bank cards they had stolen earlier, so they went looking for an ATM. They tried unsuccessfully to get $500 from one ATM, but got $400 from another. This is where they got caught on CCTV. They then drove back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. In their absence, a struggle ensued in the house. Amanda came to her senses after being hit and lunged at the perpetrator, at which point he tackled the woman. Afterward, Taylor put the stolen debit cards in the car of accomplices who had gone to an ATM at the time of the crime, and when they returned, he admitted to shooting Amanda. According to court documents, the Blackburn home was the third target of the November 10th attack by Taylor, Watson, and Gordon. In the first break-in, the thieves stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the resident was asleep. While inside the home, they discovered they were being recorded by a video camera, but simply moved on. The group drove up to another home, broke in through a patio window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater that eventually helped police identify them, the affidavit said. Court documents outlined the evidence police collected against the suspects. The most important piece of evidence, Watson's DNA was found on a pink sweater taken during the second burglary, which was then used to cover his face from a surveillance camera as he tried to withdraw cash using Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with the investigation in return for a reduced sentence. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary. He said he may have stopped in the Blackburn neighborhood, but claimed he was so confused he couldn't remember. Formal charges were filed by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including the very same felony, after knowingly and willfully killing Amanda Blackburn. Jalen Watson is charged with a felony. Both he and Taylor face multiple charges of burglary, robbery, and theft. Diana Gordon, who was in custody due to a parole violation, also faces burglary charges. There was a fourth person who knew about the robberies, burglaries, and other crimes but did not participate in them. He was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Height praised the cooperation that led to the arrest. The detectives worked tirelessly, all day long without sleep, to solve the murders in the city. With the assistance of Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors said they would consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, they said there was no evidence to support the rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial took place in December 2021, but the trial was over in seconds when it was discovered that one of the jurors had shared information about the case with other jurors. The disclosure interrupted the trial. A mistrial was declared. The final trial was held in October 2022. Subsequent jury selection was more thorough. The county drew more than 100 people as possible jurors. Each had to fill out a 16-page questionnaire so attorneys could assess whether they could reach a fair verdict. Larry Joe Taylor was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for the murder of Amanda Blackburn and for additional charges related to a burglary from a home. Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea agreements and testified against Larry Taylor at trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. A murder conviction in Indiana can send a person to prison for 45 to 60 years, and some are punishable by life in prison or the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence, which means he could face an additional 20 years in prison because Amanda Blackburn was pregnant when he allegedly massacred her. Davy Blackburn, the church's pastor, said he is relieved that those responsible for killing his wife have been caught and will not be able to harm anyone else. Amanda Blackburn's death has resonated with thousands of people, including the state's chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 people. Among them was Governor Mike Pence. Resonant Church has set up a donation page to help pay for Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn said he is hopeful for a judicial system that will certainly show wisdom to the people who have caused his family so much pain. Incredibly, he has repeatedly reported that he has decided to forgive Amanda's killers. I was very relieved to learn of the arrest, he told reporters. Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope. Amanda Blackburn's case has generated significant interest across the country, with coverage appearing in national and international media. Davy Blackburn changed his role from that of an unhappy husband to that of a popular blogger. He began to capitalize on his tragedy and record multiple podcasts and videos, which he called Nothing Wasted. He began appearing on TV stations and speaking out about his wife's death, repeating over and over the pain he had experienced and recounting the tragedy. But he didn't seem unhappy. Amanda's death made Davy not only famous, but rich. The fact that he received an insurance payout after his wife's death does suggest that he didn't accidentally forget to lock the door that day on November 10, 2015. didn't he? What do you guys think? On March 2nd, 2016, Davy Blackburn bought a new 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom home with a pool. He then sold the very house where Amanda was murdered. For an unhappy husband who lost his beloved, Davy was pretty happy. In July 2016, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog and captioned it, "How happy I am to have pool parties in my new home." Now Davy Blackburn is happy in his new marriage. Nothing is wasted serendipity. Turn your eyes to Jesus, gaze upon his marvelous countenance, and earthly things become strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. All world religions and nationalities have the same attitude to family values. A family is a home in which all its inhabitants should be comfortable, regardless of age and gender. Therefore, it should be built on love, respect, trust, and understanding. Family is the source of life. Parents, by their own example, instill in their children important postulates for the continuation of the family and traditions. Many people strive to create a strong and friendly family in which there is a sense of community and harmony. But not everyone succeeds. Sometimes people, creating a marriage, enter into destructive relationships. These ties destroy not only them, but also those who are around, and they tend to be very vulnerable. Hollywood movies show perfect love, full of tenderness and sincerity. Beautiful and strong men literally carry their beloved women in their arms. But reality, as we know, is different from the picture on the screen. This story is about a terrible tragedy that happened in one Indian family. The happiness of one turned into misfortune for the other, towards dreams. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983. Her family lived in a Hindu community in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England. She was the eldest child, so she grew up diligent and obedient from childhood. The girl studied well, helped around the house. At the same time was cheerful, had a perky character. Jessica had many friends, but she especially emphasized Mitesh. The boy was 3 years older than her. Unlike her, he was modest and shy. The children often played with each other. As she grew up, the girl blossomed, becoming more and more beautiful. Like many other peers, she dreamed of falling in love with a worthy man to have a happy family with a bunch of kids, just like the heroes of her favorite movies. Nevertheless, the fantasies of the young beauty did not prevent her from being intelligent and purposeful. She wanted to be independent, to be established in life. Therefore, in 2002, she entered De Montfort University in Leicester. 4 years later, she continued studying pharmacy at the University of Manchester. There again, Jessica began to communicate with Mitesh, who by chance studied at the same faculty. While the young people did not see each other, the young man matured, became confident and handsome. Gradually, their friendship developed into romantic feelings. Mitesh showered the girl with compliments and gifts, was very attentive and caring. However, the bright streak was suddenly replaced by a dark one. Life presented a serious test for Jessica. Her mother died of an incurable disease. The grief-stricken daughter took the loss of a native person hard. Mitesh supported his beloved in everything, did not leave one with bad thoughts. During this time, the relationship of the couple became stronger. Once Jessica confessed to her sister that she finally found a reliable shoulder. It seemed that her boyfriend was perfect in everything. Happy marriage. In 2008, Mitesh Patel asked the girl's father for permission to marry her, according to all Hindu rules. The father did not particularly like the candidacy of the future husband of his daughter. In addition, he believed that it is too early to marry. But Jessica tried to convince him otherwise. And in July 2009, their marriage took place. The ceremony was held in the garden of the parental home of the bride. Family life of the newlyweds seemed as beautiful as the wedding. Soon, however, Mitesh's behavior changed. He became aloof and cold. Jessica complained to her sisters that she began to feel lonely. In addition, the intimate life of the newlyweds left much to be desired. After the wedding, they did not have intimacy for about 10 months. All this was very upsetting for the young wife. She could not understand what happened to the former feelings, looking for a problem in herself. In 2010, Jessica graduated from university. Now she had the opportunity to start a career as a pharmacist. In short, live and be happy, prosperity, higher education, a beloved husband. Except that Mitesh's attitude deteriorated. The man became bossy and suspicious, controlled his wife's every move. In February, her family suffered another grief. Her grandfather fell ill. His health was deteriorating every day. The end was imminent. While the whole family spent the last days by his side, his beloved granddaughter visited him only rarely. Sister Manal later confessed that her husband did not allow Jessica to stay with her parents for a long time, and in general, often go anywhere. On this ground between the spouses, there was a conflict. The young woman did not understand what earned such distrust, which openly informed Mitesh. However, he became more angry and hit the unfortunate woman in the face. The young people came from traditional Indian families where the head of the family has the final say. So she had no choice but to obey the man. Loneliness in marriage. One day Jessica shared her concerns with her family. She said that she suspected her spouse of cheating. According to her, every time Mitesh talked on the phone, he went to another room. Sometimes he did not go to bed until late at night, spending long periods of time alone. In 2012, the wife's assumptions were confirmed. She accidentally saw in her husband's phone love correspondence. Hoping to gain support, Jessica found nothing better than to tell about everything to Mitesh's cousin. They had communicated well earlier, so the young woman was counting on help or advice to save the family. However, Mitesh's brother brushed it off, making it clear that since her husband was cheating, it was all her own fault. This situation deprived Jessica of understanding from her husband's relatives. In parallel, he forbade her to seek comfort in the arms of her sisters. It was clear that Mitesh was hiding something. He was afraid to lose the authority and respect not only of his family, but also of the local community, so he restricted his wife's communication in every possible way, hoping for a miracle. In 2014, Mitesh and Jessica moved to Linthorpe, a suburb of Middlesbrough, North Yorkshire, away from the family. The couple bought a spacious house with many rooms, made renovations. A year later, they rented a premises in which they opened their own pharmacy. Jessica believed that the move would be the beginning of a new life. Relations between them did become warmer. The only thing missing was children. During the 6 years of their life together, the woman could not get pregnant. Mitesh began to hint that if this did not happen, he would be forced to leave her. Therefore, in October 2015, she decided to resort to IVF. The first few attempts were not successful. The woman became nervous and increasingly depressed. Her condition was aggravated by taking hormones. In addition, instead of the expected care and warmth, Mitesh became distant again. He pretended to be a courteous husband only in public, and when he returned home, he would not let the phone out of his hands. He could snap. Nervous tension reached the limit, as a result of which the wife could not stand it and suggested separation. She told her husband that she was disappointed in him and unhappy in the marriage. The man's response surprised her. He began to assure her that he loves her, and in time everything will get better. And the best way to strengthen family ties will be a baby. Jessica believed his words. She had not heard anything like that for a long time, so after receiving a small portion of attention, she calmed down. Mitesh convinced her that he wanted children and a complete family, only did not tell her that for this he had assigned a special role to his spouse. On May 9, 2018, the Patel couple received great news. 3 embryos were successfully fertilized. Their transfer was scheduled for next month. This meant that soon, with the successful development of events, they would become parents. The future mom was over the moon. She was so happy that she hurried to tell her family about everything. Everyone was looking forward to the replenishment. Except that it did not happen. A few days later, Jessica was not. Mysterious murder. On the evening of May 14, 2018, the emergency service received a call. The caller turned out to be Mitesh Patel, who found his wife's dead body wrapped in duct tape at home. Gasping with excitement, the man said that he left home to buy something to eat and to see the guys at work, to pick up his laptop. When he returned home, he found his house burglarized and his wife lying unconscious. Sobbing, he added that the woman's skin was very cold and dark marks could be seen on her neck. The dispatcher informed Patel that help was close at hand, with a police unit on its way. When officers arrived on scene, they found the woman's body on the living room floor. Her wrists and ankles were bound with duct tape, and a bag from the grocery store was lying nearby. Unfortunately, there was nothing the paramedics could do to help. Jessica Patel was murdered. Investigators had to figure out what motivated such a brutal crime. The house was turned upside down, and closet drawers were gutted. The criminals were clearly looking for something to eat, as they even ripped up the mattress of the couple's bed. Then jewelry and cash were discovered missing. Everything pointed to a robbery. Moreover, the husband of the murdered woman was convinced that the house had been broken into by robbers. In his statement, Nitesh said that on the unfortunate day he worked his morning shift, then worked out at the gym and came home. After work, his spouse returned around 7 p.m. The man volunteered to go get a pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Thanks to a CCTV camera at a local pizzeria, it was possible to confirm his words. It captured the tell placing the order. He was friendly with the staff and had a relaxed demeanor. Before leaving the establishment, he called his wife to tell her that he would be back soon, but did not get through. On the way out, Mitesh decided to stop at a pharmacy, so he stayed longer than he had planned. At 8:50 p.m., he returned home and saw a horrible picture: scattered belongings and a battered wife. Neighbors were no less shocked by what had happened. The neighborhood where the couple lived was considered one of the most prosperous and peaceful. Nothing criminal had ever happened in the neighborhood in its history. Jessica's autopsy revealed that the cause of death was strangulation. The attacker initially used a bag, after which he wielded his bare hands. Finally, probably to be sure of the victim's demise, he used an electrical cord as a ligature. Since no signs of forced entry were found, the investigation put forward an initial version. The victim knew the attacker and let him into the house herself, an inconsolable widower. As soon as Jessica's family learned about her death, her father, along with her sisters, immediately came to support her unhappy husband. No wonder, because in such terrible moments the family must stick together. They tried to comfort Mitesh as best they could. Despite the fact that the relationship between the spouses was not always simple, the relatives of the deceased embraced the inconsolable son-in-law and tried to find the right words. They themselves were in deep sorrow and agonized in conjecture. Who and why took away from the family favorite daughter, sister, and wife? However, the police seemed suspicious of the robbery, despite its apparent obviousness. After searching the house, the officers found some curious clues, thanks to which the criminal was soon apprehended and brought to trial. In the establishment of the truth also played a big role in the application on the victim's cell phone, monitoring the state of health of its owner. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator in the case contacted the victim's father, who was still near Mitesh. The official asked the woman's relatives to return home so as not to interfere with the investigation. He promised to give more details later. In fact, detectives were about to detain the suspect in the case, Mitesh Patel. There were quite good reasons for his arrest. It turns out that during the search of the house was found a hard disk from a video surveillance camera, which was installed in front of the front door. The device was in a suitcase under the bed. It was later determined that someone had damaged it just a few minutes before the police arrived. The next find was a photograph hidden under the double bottom of the couple's nightstand. It shows Mitesh in an embrace with another man named Amit. In addition, footage from a camera installed in a house across the street showed that on May 14th, the only people who went in and out of the Patel family home were the couple themselves. The footage shows Mitesh returning at 3:30 in the afternoon and never leaving the house again. Jessica did arrive at the end of the workday, parked the car, and entered the building at 7 p.m. The man then left for the pizza place at 7:44 p.m. and returned at 8:50 p.m. No one else but them was in the lens, which meant only one thing. Mitesh was the potential perpetrator, a mystery behind 7 seals. Patel became the prime suspect, but there was no direct evidence against him. So the detectives continued the investigation. During the investigation, the main secret was revealed, which Mitesh so carefully hid from family and friends. Jessica was right when she suspected her husband of cheating, but only it is not known for sure whether she guessed that her husband liked exclusively men. Apparently, marriage to a woman was necessary as a cover for the real orientation. The happiness of Jessica, who was by his side for many years, he cared the least. It turns out that 2 years after the wedding, Mitesh met Amit. But the latter, unlike him, did not hide his preferences, despite the fact that he was also a native of an Indian family. The men immediately liked each other and began to meet secretly. Leaving on a business trip, the exemplary-looking spouse spent time with his lover. In 2016, Amit left for Australia, but their romance continued. In the head of Mitesh, a terrible plan was born. Together with her lover, they wanted to not only start a family, but also become same-sex parents using Jessica's embryos and a surrogate. In his message, Patel revealed that the spouse was undergoing IVF. That's when he asked Amit if they will be together after that. To which Amit replied that it all depends on the outcome of the procedure. While communicating, Mitesh made it clear that sooner or later there will come a time when there will be no obstacles in their relationship. In a recent message he wrote, "Jessica's days are numbered." It was later revealed that the treacherous spouse was taking drugs that affected childbearing. All this he did in order not to have intimate relations with his wife. The investigation has established. Investigators were also able to reconstruct Mitesh's search history. The man's requests on the internet were strikingly eloquent. How to get rid of his wife, Hindu funeral, the procedure for obtaining insurance payments for the murder of a spouse. In fact, Jessica's life was insured for £2 million. After her death, her husband planned to cash in the insurance policy and use the proceeds to buy a property in Australia. In recent weeks, Patel had been searching for a suitable home. He wanted to create comfortable conditions for the new family and carefully prepared for it. During the study of the spouse's cell phones, in addition to the denunciatory correspondence, the investigators focused their attention on an application that counted the number of steps taken by the owner of the smartphone for the day. It was found that since 8:04 p.m., Jessica had not moved again. However, after 15 minutes, her phone had already recorded a movement of 14 steps. Apparently, these were her last movements, or someone simply moved the device. As for Mitesh's activity, his phone showed high physical activity readings just prior to his wife's murder. His heart rate was higher than his typical rate. There were sudden ascents and descents of stairs between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Apparently, at this point, he was staging a burglary by throwing things around the house. And before calling 911, Patel went upstairs to hide evidence, a hard drive from a surveillance camera. In the safe of the pharmacy the couple owned, police found stolen jewelry and £25,000, as well as a couple of gold bars, all of which the widower said had gone missing from the house during the robbery. Also found there was a skein of duct tape similar to that used to wrap the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched the one that was taken as evidence from Jessica's body. Apparently, it was with the goal of getting rid of the evidence that Mitesh stopped by work the evening after the pizza party. Although the man had been planning the crime for several years, he was extremely careless in his approach to the crime and left a mess everywhere. There was no doubt about his guilt. On top of that, the genetic examination of the material collected from under the fingernails of the murdered woman determined the DNA of the spouse. There were also scratch marks on Mitesh's neck, which he did not even try to hide, claiming that he had fallen. The trial and life afterward. Patel did not admit his guilt either during the investigation or the subsequent trial. He said that he did communicate with Amit, but everything that happened was a big coincidence. The trial of the accused lasted 3 weeks. The picture of what happened was established. The husband attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house. She fought back and scratched, but the forces were unequal. Mitesh had initially chosen a different method to kill his wife. A large dose of insulin was found in her blood, which could have been fatal, but much later than the perpetrator expected. An overdose of insulin causes coma and subsequent death. However, anything could have happened during this time. Eventually, the criminal's plan could have been thwarted. So Mitesh decided to finish Jessica off by putting a bag over her head. To make sure his wife was finally dead, he strangled her with his hands and then used a cord. As physical evidence, the prosecution showed empty ampoules that were found in Patel's laptop bag. It took him 20 minutes to take the life of a woman who had been by his side for years and shared the same shelter. The man showed incredible cruelty towards her. He then tied up his wife's hands and feet, making it look like a robbery. Afterward, he drove to the pizza place like nothing happened and even called her. Jessica's family could not believe what they heard. Both sides of the family were in complete shock. No one would listen or believe Jessica when she was looking for help and support. No one even stepped in to try to figure out what was going on in the family, except perhaps Jessica's sisters. But there was little they could do, because they were in an unequal position. It took the jury 2 hours to reach a verdict. On December 5, 2018, the court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison with a right to parole after 30 years. At the end, the judge voiced his thoughts that it doesn't look like the man has any remorse. In all likelihood, the only person Mitesh truly felt sorry for was himself. It is unlikely that the family will ever forgive the man for the sin he committed. They pray for Jessica every day and remember her. According to Hindu beliefs, her soul must be reborn. Since she suffered a lot in life and was unhappy, but remained a good person, in the next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that is the comfort of her loved ones, who have nothing else to do but mourn and hope for a reunion after death.